Next on Lakeshore Focus, you will get to experience one of the most amazing women you will ever meet and an individual who has been a very important leader for our region, our state, and our nation. Stay with us for an interview with Indiana State Senator Earline Rogers.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.
Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. Periodically, I will invite to our show a guest who deserves individual attention. My criteria is simple: a person who has done something remarkable and has an interesting story. When that special someone has an ample dose of wisdom and inspires by her presence, that is a bonus. If the guest has a lifetime of achievements and the respect of large numbers of admirers, it's a home run. Well, today's guest has all of these characteristics and more. She has fought the good fight, run the race, and actually has a few ribbons to show for it. Let's meet a remarkable woman who has just announced her retirement from 34 years of public service in Indiana, 8 as a state representative, and 26 as a state senator. The one, the only, Earline Rogers. Didn't mean to make that sound like a eulogy for you, but...
Right, I did that myself the other day. I was telling someone who congratulated me on my retirement. I said, yeah, you don't know, I can rest in peace. And then I hesitated. I said, no, I don't want to go quite that far.
Well, and I even said run the race and fought the fight, but I think you still got a lot of fight in you and a lot of race to run.
Thank you
still,
so
don't
much.
you?
Thank you. Yeah, I do. I do intend to stay involved.
I just never see you going, oh, I'm done, and don't bother me.
No, that's not Earline Rogers, as my husband and my children will tell most people. I think she has ADD.
Well, you know, I kind of like to reflect upon this 34-year career, because a lot of us probably didn't know you back then and so forth. But what possessed you, maybe that's a good word, to get into politics? Why did you first run?
Well, you know, it wasn't my idea really, and it was interesting how I got started. I was on the executive board of the Gary Teachers Union. I was the treasurer, and so we had an executive board meeting. Following that meeting, we always adjourned into a committee of COPE, the Committee on Political Education. Well, I was more interested in the score of a basketball game. My brother Earl was a basketball coach. So I went to check the score of the game on the radio, and after I heard the score, I came back into the room, and there was a guy there named Jack Friel, who was a teacher then and is an attorney now, said, and I think that person ought to be Earline Rogers. And I said, Earline Rogers, what? We think you need to run for state representative. Really? Well, the person who is there is not running. We need somebody who can handle the issues of labor and teachers, education. We think you'd be the perfect person.
So you make it sound like they did it because you were out of the room, but the reality was that they knew you were the person who probably had the most passion for this.
Right, yeah. And so that's how I got started. And I lost that first race, but then I came back and...
How'd it feel when you lost the first race?
I decided at that time I never wanted to lose another race, and that if I ever decided to run again, I was going to win. So I came back the very next year and ran for the Gary Common Council. And my husband and I knocked on every door in the district, I think, and I was elected to that position. And I served there 2 years when what happened was Adam Benjamin died. Katie Hall, who was in the Indiana Senate, she went to Congress. Carolyn Mosby, who was in the House, went to the Senate, and I left the Common Council and went down to the House of Representatives.
You make this sound so easy, like it was musical chairs, and everybody just changed chairs. But there's a lot more to this. You know, you talk about losing your first election. I remember I lost my first election too, and made that same vow, but it was only for the president of my class in high school, so it wasn't as significant.
Okay.
So you got elected and went downstate.
Right.
Recall your first year. I mean, what did that kind of feel like being there that first year?
Well, was all very new for me, and of course there were 100 people in the house, a lot of people you needed to get to know. Since my background was in education, I was immediately placed on the education committee, which was good because I was at least familiar with an issue. And I served on that committee. In fact, I've served on the education committee all through my 8 years in the House and my 25 years in the Senate. I've been the ranking minority member there for the last few years, but it was daunting. I did have a bill I tried to get through, but everybody was very kind, very nice. I can remember the speaker at that time. He welcomed me and basically said, I had a bill that I was trying to get passed, and so at the end of the session, he said to me, he said, you know, I'm very impressed with you. This is not a good bill, but in order for you to make it look good on your record, we'll pass this in the House, but you won't get a hearing in the Senate.
So
It was J. Roberts Daly, and from Muncie, Indiana, and so at that point in time, I realized that it's really the image that you have with your colleagues and how you get along with them.
you start seeing why they call it politics, right?
Absolutely,
A little bit.
right.
So fast forward to 34 years later, what made you decide the time to step out?
Well, you know, more than anything, it was the commute back and forth. Most people were surprised to find out that I drive back and forth to Indianapolis.
Every day?
No, not every day.
Okay.
During the session, you know, we were in session from Monday through Thursday. And then during the interim, we go down periodically for meetings. So the commute, and then, you know, 34 years is a long time. I thought I at least owed my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren now and my husband a little bit more of my time. And so, and I was concerned about who would be coming in to replace me. And after I met a young man that I was very much impressed with, I said, okay, Earline, you know, this is the time. This is the time.
And he's
right.
ready. So contrary to popular belief, you don't have a chauffeur taking you back and forth
No,
as part of your
absolutely not.
The perks of the job.
No, no, I drove back and forth myself. Sometimes when the roads were slick, especially in the winter, you know, we start session in January. Yeah. And sometimes I prayed from Gary all the way to Indianapolis when I saw the Capitol Dome. You know, you'd see semis jackknifed, and you wonder, now when I get to that spot, is there something there that's going to cause me to do that, you know? But and then I noticed too over the years a change in the way people drove, you know, what with the cell phones and the texting.
So it just seemed like a time
right.
to move on from this. So if you look back over these 34 years, is there something you just could look at and say, I am really proud of my involvement in this one thing?
Okay. Well, I think probably the one thing that I probably was most noteworthy about had to do with juveniles and the death penalty. And at the time, we found out that the death penalty could happen to someone as young as the age of 10 in Indiana. And so that became known worldwide. In fact, the Pope was probably my best person that was interested in it. And I got, the day the legislation passed out of the House to go into the Senate, there were monks there in their robes, and so.
So you didn't get to meet the Pope?
I didn't get it. No, I didn't get a chance to meet the Pope.
But just knew he was a supporter.
Right. And in fact, the Pope shared with me a magazine from Italy. And of course, it was written in Italian. The only thing that I could recognize was Earline Rogers, which was my name. But I think that probably put me on the path of being a person, you know, who was interested in getting things done, you know, to the benefits of those I represent. I guess the other was JoJo's Law, we called it. A young preschooler named JoJo Wright was riding in an 18-passenger van, and there was an accident, and JoJo lost his life. And I researched it and came up with legislation that would mandate that anybody transporting children in 18-passenger vans, that this would no longer be legal, and that they would have to use vehicles that had passed federal safety guidelines. So when I'm on the highway and I see one of those little short buses, then I know that that was the result of my labors and my efforts to
That's
get
going to
that
feel
done.
really gratifying.
It
You know,
does.
I tease people all the time about when we're doing introductions, I'll say, oh, so tell me your most embarrassing moment. So I'm actually going to ask you, so when is the moment in that 34 years when you go, I can't believe I just did that, or that just happened?
Probably had to do when I was, I didn't realize the uproar that would be caused if I had a gun control bill, okay? And I had a gun control bill that I was surprised when I went to the Senate that they placed the bill in the Agriculture Committee. And I'm thinking, Agriculture Committee, what does that have to do with this? But anyway, the chairman of that committee was a guy named Johnny Nugent. And he was from Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And so, you know, a chairman has to say whether or not they will hear your bill. And so he was seated in the chambers late one day, and I approached him and I asked him if he'd had an opportunity to read the bill, and he said he had. And I said, well, I was coming to you. I wanted to find out whether or not you're going to hear the bill in your committee. And so he started reaching in his pockets and looking around and moving around, and I'm trying to figure out, and I said, what, are you looking for something? He said, yes, I'm looking for my NRA card. I serve on the national board of the National Rifle Association. And then so he said, does that answer your question?
I thought you were going to say he was looking for his gun, you know, at some point. I thought maybe he was packing
Well, he
right
did.
there.
He did. He carried a gun. I mean, he did. He's one of those legislators that carries guns into the
Well,
legislature.
we've heard that goes
But
on.
I
so
was
that really goes
chagrined.
on.
I mean, I was annoyed. I was embarrassed, and all of that. But you know, what happened later on after that was Johnny Nugent. He and some legislators from Southern Indiana had just had a bill passed dealing with riverboat gambling out of the House. And so they came to me, and because they knew I'd always had a bill on land-based casinos, okay? But my bill had not gotten out of the House. And so they said, you know, Earline, if you will join us in this, our trying to get riverboats for Southern Indiana along the Ohio River, then if your bill ever gets to the Senate, then we will support you. And I said, let me tell you this, there is no bill or no law that's going to be passed that doesn't include Gary, Indiana, or my region. And so at that point in time, I made an agreement with them. So they said, well, you don't have a river. I said, no, but I've got a lake, so we can use Lake Michigan. And so that was how we came together to get the boats on Lake Michigan. So there were 5 licenses on Lake Michigan and 5 licenses on the Ohio River. So Johnny Nugent and I, this same legislator who I was so embarrassed by, and I became known as the mother and father of casino gaming in this state.
Kind of one of those strange bedfellow kind of
Absolutely,
things, right?
absolutely. And we became very fast friends. In fact, you know, some bill came along, I guess I voted for, he made me an honorary member of the NRA.
Did you accept it?
Sure, I accepted it, right. He passed a resolution, and, you know, and it was a lot of fun, but.
Well, you know, one of the things that was always said about you is that you were a legislator who could reach compromise, who could work with all sides, even sides who were very different from each other.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Where's that? That's rare these days.
Yeah.
Where's that come from for you? And
I think it comes from my background as a teacher in terms of listening and then trying to find solutions to problems. I know, for example, Luke Kinley, who chairs the appropriations meeting, has been very instrumental in aiding me in some of my efforts in Indianapolis to help Gary, to help the region. And so periodically I would ask him, you know, for some help in something or to take a look at something. And so one day I did that, and he walked away, and it took about 3 steps. And he stopped, and he turned around, he said, you know, I got it. He said, I've always wondered why when you tell me to do something or ask me to do something, I do it. He said, you remind me of my teacher.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so I think maybe it's the teacher in me that causes me to maybe, you know, interact the way that, and people to feel maybe comfortable with me. This is another story. And this other, Colin Yoder, very conservative, very, you know, right against anything dealing with labor, you know, and so I'm the labor person, and he is the very opposite of that. But we got to be, we talked from time to time, and so one day he said, I've got a question I want to ask you. And I said, sure, what is it? So he said, I have adopted a son from Haiti. And he says, and I don't quite know what to do about his hair, and I don't know quite what to do about after he takes a bath, his skin is ashen, you know, so you know. And so then I said, well, do you have any barbers, black barber shops in your area? You know, it'd be good for you to take him to that kind of a barber shop. And I said, you know, Vaseline, any lotion with Vaseline in it will help with the ashiness of his skin, you know. And so I thought with him feeling comfortable enough to ask me that, you know, and then I had an opportunity to meet his son.
So you'd made some great progress in that. That's
right.
These are really good stories,
Okay,
by the way.
Right.
So you've talked about a number of leaders that you've dealt with in different levels. If you look back, if there was one leader, at whatever level, that you just always admired or just said, that person is really a really good leader, who would that be?
Well, it might surprise people, you know, and I think we have a Mutual Admiration Society, and I think that person would be Governor Mitch Daniels. We worked together very well. One thing I was impressed by his intellect, and what we've always said in the Senate is not only did Mitch Daniels have an idea of what needed to be done, but he gave you a path to getting it done. He wasn't one of these governors that would say we need to do this, that, and I'll let the legislature decide, you know, how we get there. And I think probably the biggest example of that was the Major Moves legislation that we passed, and it was interesting. Because the Democrats were not in support of it, but I had an opportunity to meet the consortium, the Spanish and Australian consortium, that were going to be over the leasing of the toll road. And I was very impressed by them. I mean, they had a resume full of, you know, projects that they have done that were very successful. The one closest was the Skyway, you know, that I travel often, so I was very familiar with that. And so I was comfortable with that, with the lease agreement.
I like that idea of taking and showing the path to get to something.
Right.
So when your successor gets elected this fall, and you have that opportunity to sit down with that person and just say, give a little piece of advice about how to be successful in that role as senator, what's that one piece of advice you're going to give?
Well, number one, be yourself. And knowing the person that, and I'll say his name, Eddie Melton, since he's just won the primary election. Knowing that person, I think he will do that. Number one, be yourself. Number two, ask questions. Not only of the people on the Democratic side of the aisle, but the Republican side of the aisle. And listen more than you talk. I've seen a lot of legislators that thought, you know, they had to get to the podium and pound the podium and talk. And it got to the point where they went so often that people stopped listening to what they had to say. So, only go to the podium when you've got something, to say. And also find an area in which you can become an expert in and delve into that area so that you're the person that both sides of the aisle looks to in order to get information. I know Bob Garden, who was a president pro tem at one time, came to me and he said, sometimes I feel like asking you to come into our Republican caucus because when we're in caucus, people talk more about what you've had to say and the ideas that you've had than they do, within the caucus itself. And they always want to know what Senator Rogers thinks about a particular issue.
That's got to be really gratifying.
Really gratifying.
So we're down to the end here, and I did this with Karen Freeman Wilson. She liked this question. Is like, so I'm going to give you the magic wand, the magic wish. You get to make one change. If you could change one thing about our state, our community, what would you change? You've got the power to do it. What would you change?
Well, I guess I would make certain that there was more interaction between people of different backgrounds. I think our communities right now, especially in this area of the state, are basically kind of segregated. And I know through my experiences in the legislature that the more you interact, the more you're able to understand another person's point of view. Not only are you able to understand it, but you're able to at least accept them for their points of view. I've been able to do that in Indianapolis, and I know when I was leaving on the last day, one of the legislators came up to me and he said, I'm glad that we had a chance to work together. He said, I came in here seeing everything only as black and white. He said, but I do know now that there is a gray, and so I thanked him for that, and hopefully that was something that will carry on as he, continues to work in the legislature.
Well, Earline, you've been a great role model for a lot of people in leadership roles, and you've done such a significant amount of contribution here to our region. So I thank you on behalf of all of our viewers for that and on behalf of the station. But I know we're going to see more from you, so
right, yeah.
We'll be watching. I'll probably get you on TV again here at some point. So thanks for being here.
Okay. Yeah, and I'd love to do that because one of the things I always like to quote Shirley Chisholm, who said, service is the rent you pay for living on this earth. And so I will be continuing to pay rent.
Okay. Thanks, Earline.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
A very good friend of mine, George Miga, who served as an executive with Standard Oil, then Amoco, often says, good leadership is like beauty. Hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. Instead of looking for that positive side, most of us will complain about the bad leadership we witness or hear about. The sad part, there are way too many examples of poor decisions, unethical behavior, and self-serving practices. We talk about it with our friends, we gripe to our coworkers, and bemoan with our family. When is the last time you noted a leader who had done something great? There are many acts of great leadership all around us. We just need to look for them. I think about the young man who serves as a Boy Scout leader, organizing his kids for campouts and serving as a role model. I reflect on an elected official who stands up for something she thinks is right, not what is popular. Or an employee who volunteers to lead a project team when no one else will step up. At church, the person who time and time again gets the food, sets up the room, and schedules all the helpers. So many examples of great leadership at all levels. Your recognition of these acts of courage, self-sacrifice, and service can mean so much to that person who does it because he or she feels the responsibility, embraces the challenge, or wants to solve the problem. We need not understand their motives. We need only to appreciate that they have done something which no one else had thought to do or made the effort. A written note, a phone call, email, or face-to-face comment would mean so much to that person. Your act of gratitude says, thanks for your leadership. Each time I have done this, it has often been met with, "You're the first person to say that." Maybe if we start reinforcing and appreciating solid leadership, we would see more of it. As always, I want to hear from you. We welcome your comments and thoughts about the content of this program or what is happening in our communities. You can email us at focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org or reach us on our website. During June, we are going to rerun a couple of oldie but goodie focus shows as companions to two shows, The Jackie Robinson Story and Shifting Sands. Watch for both of them. Now, don't forget to stay with us and watch Counterpoint with Gerard McClendon, which follows this show. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.